It was one of those mid-November days when the light slants in just right, brushing the countertops in a soft, golden glow. I was alone in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, the rhythm of the knife on the cutting board almost meditative. There's something about the kitchen that always feels like home to me. The scent of garlic, the warmth radiating from the oven, the gentle clatter of utensils. It's where I think, where I remember, and where I feel most myself. That day, my grandson, Luke, had come over earlier to help me with some chores. By the time I found myself alone, he had wandered off, probably buried in one of his storybooks. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own heartbeat. I was wiping down the counter when I heard footsteps padding toward me. "Grandma?" His voice was soft, tentative. I turned, and there he was, leaning against the doorway with that uncertain look kids sometimes have when they're about to say something important. I smiled at him, curious. "What is it, sweetie?" I asked, wiping my hands on a towel. He shuffled his feet, looking down at the tiles. "Can I sit with you for a bit? I mean, really sit and talk?" I was taken aback. We spent plenty of time together, of course, but he rarely asked for moments like this, moments that weren't filled with games or snacks or cartoons. There was a seriousness in his eyes that made me nod slowly. "Of course, honey. Come sit." He climbed onto a stool, swinging his legs a little nervously, and we were quiet for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Then he looked up at me and asked, "Grandma, do you ever feel like nobody really understands you?" The question caught me off guard. I froze, knife still in hand, because here was my grandson, barely 10, but speaking words that sounded older than his years. I could feel the tension in the room, not uncomfortable, but charged with something deeply human, a desire to connect, to be seen. I set the knife down and leaned on the counter. "Sometimes," I said softly, meeting his gaze. "But usually, the people who care about you try, even if they don't always get it right." He nodded slowly as if absorbing every word. Then he said something that made my heart ache in the most beautiful way. "I think I want to understand you better, if that's okay." The air between us shifted. There was trust, a kind of quiet intimacy that surprised me. In that moment, it wasn't just a grandmother and grandson sitting in a kitchen. It was two people opening a small window into their hearts, exploring a connection that had always been there, but rarely spoken aloud. I motioned to the chair across from me. "Sit. Tell me what's on your mind." And so he did. And so I listened. He took a deep breath, tapping his fingers against the edge of the stool, and then he looked up at me with those big, earnest eyes. "Grandma, do you ever get lonely?" It was such a simple question, but it hit me harder than I expected. I paused, feeling the weight of it settle over me like the late afternoon sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my own loneliness inside, tucked between the rhythms of daily life, hidden behind the busyness of chores, phone calls, and errands. I do sometimes," I admitted, my voice quiet, almost like a secret. "Even when the house is full of people or the phone is ringing, sometimes you can still feel alone in the middle of it all." He nodded slowly, chewing on the inside of his cheek. "I don't like feeling lonely either," he said, and then, after a pause, he added, "But I think it's different with you. I mean, you don't just talk, you listen." I felt a lump rise in my throat. There's nothing more touching than a child noticing the small things, the nuances that adults often overlook. I smiled at him, reaching over to squeeze his small hand. "Thank you, sweetie. That means a lot." For a few minutes, we sat in silence, just listening. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint clatter of the wind against the windows, the subtle aroma of garlic and onions I had left simmering on the stove. It was a quiet that felt alive, as if the kitchen itself was holding its breath with us. Then Luke leaned forward, eyes bright with a mix of curiosity and vulnerability. "Grandma, can I ask you something a little weird?" I chuckled softly. "Of course. Weird is fine with me." He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully, then blurted out, "Do you ever wish someone could just understand everything about you without you having to explain?" The room seemed to grow warmer somehow, the sunlight catching the edges of the counter, painting everything in a golden hue. His words resonated deeply with me, stirring memories of moments I had never shared with anyone, moments of fear, doubt, joy, and longing. I realized that he wasn't just asking a question. He was reaching for a connection, a bond that was deeper than any ordinary conversation. "Yes," I whispered, surprising even myself. "Sometimes I do. And when someone truly sees you, even just a little, it feels like coming home." Luke's face softened, and he nodded as if he understood perfectly, even without fully knowing the weight of the words. "I think I want to be that person for you," he said simply, and my heart ached with a sweetness that words could barely capture. There was a moment of silence after that, a pause where the air itself seemed to settle around us. I realized then that this small kitchen, with its worn counters and familiar smells, had become a sanctuary, a space where trust and vulnerability could exist without fear. I reached for a small, warm hand and held it gently. "And I want to be that person for you too, Luke. Always." The sunlight faded slowly as the afternoon moved toward evening, but inside there was a quiet warmth, a sense of something precious unfolding. And I knew in that moment that this unexpected conversation had shifted something between us forever. The evening shadows stretched longer across the kitchen floor, painting everything in soft, amber tones. Luke stayed perched on the stool, his small frame leaning slightly forward, hands folded in his lap, and I felt a quiet awe at how he had grown, not just in years, but in understanding, in empathy. After a moment, he spoke again, voice low, almost hesitant. "Grandma, can I tell you a secret?" I nodded, my heart tightening with anticipation. "Of course, honey. You can tell me anything." He took a deep breath, and I could see the wheels turning behind his young eyes. "Sometimes I feel like nobody really listens to me, like I'm invisible." His words hung in the air, fragile but heavy. "But when I'm here with you, it feels different. I feel seen." I swallowed hard. That little boy, who still had scraped knees and a love of comic books, was talking about feelings I sometimes struggled to voice myself. And in a way I hadn't expected, his honesty gave me permission to open up even further. "I know exactly what you mean," I said softly. "There are times when I feel invisible too. But right now, sitting here with you, I feel seen as well. It's comforting." He studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful, and then a shy smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Grandma, do you ever think maybe people just don't know how to understand each other?" I chuckled quietly, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Yes, Luke, I think that's true. But when someone really wants to, they try. And even if it's not perfect, it's worth it." He nodded, and I could see the relief in his small shoulders, the tension in his hands slowly loosening. "I want to try," he said simply. "I want to understand you better. I want to know what makes you happy and what makes you sad." It struck me how mature his words sounded, how gentle, and how rare it is for a child to express such intent with clarity. I felt a surge of love and pride, mingled with a quiet ache. For so long I had carried pieces of myself silently, afraid of being misunderstood. But here he was, asking for the pieces willingly, ready to hold them with care. "Luke," I said, reaching across the counter to brush a stray lock of hair from his forehead, "you're already doing it. Just by being here, just by listening, you're understanding more than you realize." He smiled softly, and I could see the faint blush in his cheeks. For a moment, the kitchen felt almost sacred, a place outside time. The ordinary details, the chipped counter edges, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the lingering scent of onions and garlic, suddenly felt infused with significance, like they were silent witnesses to a quiet, shared truth. And then, in that stillness, he said something that caught me completely off guard. "Grandma, can I hug you?" The request was simple, yet profound. It wasn't about comfort alone. It was about trust, about connection, about acknowledging that sometimes words aren't enough. Without hesitation, I moved closer, and he climbed down from the stool into my arms. We held each other tightly, and in that embrace, I felt a wave of gratitude and wonder. It was more than just a hug. It was understanding. It was acceptance. It was love. When we finally pulled back, he rested his head against my shoulder, and we stayed like that, silent but deeply connected. I realized then that moments like these, unexpected, tender, and honest, are rare gifts, and that sometimes it takes someone else's courage to help you find your own. I looked down at him, this small, extraordinary boy who had just reminded me of what it means to be truly seen, and I felt a quiet shift inside me. Something had changed. Something had grown. And I knew, as I cleaned up the counter together, that this day would stay with us forever, not because of what we did, but because of how we truly met each other, heart to heart, in the ordinary space of a kitchen that had suddenly become extraordinary. The kitchen was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. Luke had wandered off to his homework, leaving me to finish the last of the dishes. The scent of garlic and onions had softened into something warm and comforting, like the memory of the afternoon itself. I leaned against the counter, letting the quiet settle around me, but it wasn't the same kind of lonely quiet as before. It was gentle, familiar, filled with a new kind of presence, the echo of our conversation, the weight of a shared trust. I thought about the moment he asked me to hug him, how small and tentative he had been, and yet how much courage it took to open up like that. And I realized that I had learned something too, not just about him, but about myself. About allowing someone to see the parts of you that are usually kept hidden, about letting love and connection in, even when it feels vulnerable. Sitting there, I reflected on how easy it is to go through life without being truly seen. We all wear masks, hide our fears, and carry our quiet moments of loneliness like heavy bags. But when someone asks the right question, or simply listens, it can change everything. That afternoon with Luke was proof of that. I smiled as I wiped my hands on the towel. My grandson, only 10 years old, had reminded me that intimacy isn't just about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's in the small things. Sitting together, sharing a question, allowing yourself to be heard, letting someone into the quiet corners of your heart. I thought about the light on the counters, how it had moved from golden to amber, and how even the smallest shifts can feel profound when you notice them. And I realized that the kitchen, my familiar sanctuary, had become something more, a place where love could be felt, spoken, and held. I poured myself a cup of tea, feeling the warmth seep into my hands. I thought about Luke again, about his honesty, his courage, his desire to understand me. And I knew that our bond had grown in a way that would last a lifetime. Not because of anything extraordinary, but because we had met each other honestly, with respect, with curiosity, and with love. As I took a sip, I let myself smile, a quiet, contented smile that comes from understanding something deeply about life, about people, about connection. I realized that being seen, being heard, being understood, these were the moments that truly mattered, and I felt grateful. Grateful for a grandson who could ask a surprising question, for a kitchen that had held our hearts, for the quiet magic of an ordinary day turned extraordinary. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we had discovered something timeless together, that love is built in small, tender moments, and that even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary connection is possible. I turned off the kitchen light, leaving a faint glow from the stove as I walked to the living room. Luke was humming softly to himself over his homework. I paused at the doorway, watching him, feeling a quiet pride and a deep sense of peace. Some days, life surprises you in the gentlest ways, and some days, those surprises stay with you forever.